Officers humiliate Keanu Reeves in a diner, but then they see it on his desk. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more inspiring stories. It was a chilly November evening in 2007 when three off-duty police officers walked into a quiet diner in Silver Lake, Los Angeles. They were laughing loudly, swapping stories and scanning the place. For a table at the far corner near the window sat a man who looked vaguely familiar, dressed in a plain black hoodie and faded jeans, his messy hair tucked behind his ears. He appeared unremarkable at first glance. Little did they know this unassuming figure was Keanu Reeves, the Hollywood star known for his humility. The officers exchanged smirks and whispered to one another, wondering what someone like him could be doing alone at a diner that late. Isn't that guy supposed to be a millionaire? One of them scoffed. Looks like he forgot his stylist. Their voices weren't as low as they thought, and Keanu, who was calmly sipping coffee, glanced up briefly, offering a polite smile when the officers approached his table. It wasn't to greet him warmly. They stood over him, their badges gleaming in the dim light, cracking jokes about his appearance. Hey, buddy, big night at the thrift shop. One of them teased. Another chimed in, you planning to pay for that coffee, or should we start a collection? Keanu, ever composed, simply nodded, thanked them for their service, and returned to reading a leather-bound journal he had placed on the table. His calm demeanor seemed to frustrate them further. What's that, your script for the next Matrix movie? One officer sneered, leaning closer to the book. Keanu remained silent, flipping the page, but then something caught their attention. Resting on the table beside the journal was a worn folded paper with intricate childlike drawings. At first it seemed insignificant, a scribble perhaps, but the closer they looked, the clearer it became. The drawings were unmistakably those of a young child, each figure surrounded by little notes in uneven handwriting. One officer leaned in to get a better look and froze. Scrolled in bright marker were the words, "Thank you for being my hero, Uncle Keanu, love, Emma." Their smirks faded as realization dawned. Keanu had always been known for his acts of quiet kindness, but this was different. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, suddenly unsure of themselves. The edges of the paper were taped together as if it had been cherished for years. There were doodles of a man holding hands with a young girl, stick figures laughing, and even one labeled "Best Day Ever," featuring a little girl on a movie set. The tension in the air shifted as the officers slowly backed away, their earlier bravado replaced by something more subdued. Keanu looked up, catching their changed expressions, but said nothing. The journal remained open, revealing glimpses of what seemed to be heartfelt letters, poems and clippings. What was the story behind the drawings? Who was Emma, and why did this mean so much to Keanu? The officers left the diner quietly, but something about that moment stayed with them, and as Keanu finished his coffee and placed a generous tip on the table, he left the diner too, the mystery of his life lingering in the minds of those who had crossed his path that evening. As Keanu Reeves stepped out into the brisk night air, the memory of the officer's ridicule seemed to fade, but the weight of the folded paper in his pocket did not. He walked slowly to his motorcycle, the hum of the city blending with his thoughts. The letter from Emma wasn't just a sentimental keepsake, it was a lifeline, a reminder of a bond forged through tragedy and resilience. The story of Emma began years earlier in 2003 after Keanu's life had been shattered by one loss after another. His girlfriend, Jennifer Sim, had passed away in a devastating car accident shortly after that. They had endured the heartbreak of losing their stillborn daughter. Grief became an unwelcome companion for Keanu, one he carried silently, choosing to channel his pain into compassion for others. It was during this time that he met Emma. Emma was the 6-year-old daughter of Keanu's childhood friend Tom. Tom had been a single father since losing his wife to cancer, and despite his best efforts, life had become a relentless struggle. Keanu, noticing his old friend's exhaustion and Emma's quiet sadness, began visiting regularly, bringing books, toys and his undivided attention. It wasn't long before Keanu and Emma formed a bond that went beyond Friendship, she called him Uncle Keanu. He called her his bright star. They would spend hours drawing, playing pretend, and sharing stories. Emma, wise beyond her years, had a way of making Keanu smile when no one else could, but like, as it often does, dealt another cruel hand. In 2006, Tom was diagnosed with a rare, but life as it often does dealt another cruel hand. In 2006, Tom was diagnosed with a rare illness that progressed rapidly. Keanu, devastated by the news, did everything in his power to support his friend and Emma. He covered medical bills, stayed by Tom's side during treatments, and ensured Emma felt loved and secure. When Tom passed away later that year, Emma's world fell apart. Orphaned at 9, she was on the verge of being placed into foster care. Keanu, unwilling to let her face such uncertainty, stepped in without hesitation. Though not her biological father, he became her legal guardian, pouring every ounce of his energy into ensuring she felt safe, cherished, and understood. The letter that had caught the office's attention in the diner was Emma's way of expressing gratitude on her 12th birthday. "Thank you for showing me what love is," one line read. Keanu carried it everywhere, a testament to the family he had created from the ashes of sorrow as he rode his motorcycle through the quiet streets of Los Angeles that night. He thought about Emma, now 17 and preparing to graduate high school. She had blossomed into a vibrant, compassionate young woman who dreamed of becoming an artist. She often teased him for being overly protective, but never failed to tell him she loved him. What the officers didn't know, what most people didn't know, was that Keanu had poured his heart and soul into ensuring Emma had a future as bright as her spirit. Every choice he made, every project he took on, was for her. And yet, even with all his efforts, a shadow loomed. Emma had recently been diagnosed with a serious health condition, one that required extensive treatment. The thought of losing her, of facing another unbearable loss, haunted Keanu, but as always he kept his pain hidden, focusing instead on being her unwavering pillar of strength. As he parked his motorcycle in the driveway of their modest home, the porch light flickered on. Emma stood in the doorway, her sketchbook in hand, a smile lighting up her face to the fatigue evident in her eyes. "Hey Uncle K," she called out, her voice soft but warm. "You're late. I made dinner, but don't get too excited, it's just spaghetti." Keanu chuckled, the weight of the day momentarily lifting. "Spaghetti sounds perfect," he said, walking toward her. Inside, the house was filled with little reminders of their life together, framed sketches of their adventures, photographs of laughter-filled moments, and books stacked haphazard on every surface. It was a home built not on wealth or glamour, but on love and resilience. As they sat down to eat, Emma opened her sketchbook and showed him her latest drawing, a portrait of the two of them sitting under a tree, smiling. Beneath it she had written, "Family is who you hold on to when the world lets go." Keanu felt a lump in his throat, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he reached across the table, squeezed her hand, and said, "You're my bright star, Emma, always." And though the challenges ahead were daunting, they knew they would face them together, their bond unbreakable, their love steadfast. That night after dinner, Keanu found himself sitting alone in the quiet of his small study. The walls were lined with books and Emma's artwork, each piece a snapshot of her resilience and creativity. In the center of the desk, the journal he carried everywhere, its pages filled with fragments of their journey together. He turned to a fresh page and began writing, the pen trembling slightly in his hand. He wrote about the first time Emma smiled after her father's death, a small fleeting moment during a silly game of charades. He wrote about the night she stayed up late to finish a painting for an art competition, how her face lit up when she won first place. These memories, these threads of hope, were the only thing holding him together. But tonight, the fear he had been suppressing for months finally broke through. Emma's health had been deteriorating faster than anyone expected. The doctors were optimistic but cautious, warning that the treatment would be grueling. Keanu had done everything possible to shield her from the worst of it, but he could see the toll it was taking. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed more each day, replaced by an exhaustion that no child should ever Have to endure. He closed the journal and leaned back staring at the ceiling. He was used to carrying burdens, to enduring silently, but this was different. This wasn't about him, it was about Emma, the one person he couldn't bear to lose. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Uncle K. Emma's voice was soft, hesitant. Come in, he called quickly, wiping his eyes. Emma stepped inside, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, her thin frame almost swallowed by the oversized sweater she wore. Keanu gestured for her to sit beside him. She climbed onto the chair, tucking her legs underneath her. I was thinking about Dad tonight, she said quietly. He nodded, giving her the space to continue. Do you think he'd be proud of me, she asked, her voice trembling. Keanu felt his heart twist. Emma, your dad would be so proud of you, he said firmly. You're brave, kind and talented, everything he dreamed you'd be. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled. Sometimes I feel like he's still here watching over us. Keanu reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. He is, he said softly, and so is your mom. They'd both be so proud of how strong you've been. Emma hesitated, then opened her sketchbook to a new page. I started drawing something for you, she said, handing it over. Keanu looked down and saw the beginnings of a portrait, his face framed by a halo of light beneath it. She had written, "You're my hero." For the first time in years, Keanu couldn't hold back his emotions. Tears streamed down his face as he pulled Emma into a gentle hug. No, he whispered, his voice breaking, "You're my hero." Emma, they stayed like that for a long time, the weight of their shared pain and love filling the room. Neither of them knew what the future would hold, but in that moment they found solace in each other, their bond stronger than any hardship. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Keanu returned to his desk and opened the journal again. He wrote one line at the top of the page: "No matter what happens, love endures." And with that he closed the book, ready to face whatever came next. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, late night conversations and moments of quiet reflection. Keanu stayed by Emma's side through every doctor's appointment, every grueling round of treatment, and every sleepless night. He held her hand as she winced in pain, forcing himself to stay strong even when he felt his world unraveling. One afternoon while Emma was resting, Keanu sat in the hospital's small chapel. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed above him as he stared at the flickering candles lining the altar he hadn't prayed in years. But tonight he found himself whispering into the silence, asking for strength, not for himself but for Emma. "She's just a kid," he murmured, his voice cracking. "She deserves a chance at life, at happiness. Take it out on me if you have to, just don't let her suffer." His plea hung in the air, unanswered, as the weight of helplessness threatened to crush him. That evening, Emma surprised him with a request. "Uncle K," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "can we take a drive tomorrow? Just us." Keanu hesitated. She was so frail, her energy barely lasting through the day, but the spark of determination in her eyes made him nod. "Anything you want, kiddo." The next morning Keanu helped Emma into the car, wrapping her in a blanket to shield her from the crisp winter air. "Where to?" he asked, trying to sound cheerful. Emma smiled faintly. "Somewhere with a view." They drove for hours, winding through the hills outside Los Angeles. Emma gazed out the window, her face illuminated by the golden light of the setting sun. Keanu glanced at her often, memorizing every detail: the curve of her smile, the way her hair framed her face, the quiet strength in her gaze. Finally, they reached a secluded overlook, the city sprawling beneath them in a sea of twinkling lights. Keanu parked the car, and they sat in comfortable silence, the hum of the engine their only companion. "Do you remember the time you taught me to ride a bike?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice tinged with nostalgia. Keanu laughed softly. "I remember you falling at least 10 times before you got the hang of it." Emma chuckled. "Though it was weak, and you ran after me every single time, even when I said I didn't need help. That's what uncles are for," he replied, his tone light but his heart heavy. Emma turned to him, her expression serious now. "You've always been there for me, Uncle K, through everything. I don't think I'd have made it this far without you." Keanu swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. You're stronger than you know, Emma. I'm just here to remind you of that. When they finally returned home, Emma was exhausted but content. She leaned against Keanu as he carried her to her room, her breathing soft and steady. Thank you for today, she whispered as he tucked her in. It was perfect. Keanu sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Get some rest, bright star, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We've got more adventures to plan. As he left the room, he paused in the doorway watching her sleep. The ache in his chest was unbearable, but he knew he had to stay strong for her and for the promise he made. In the days that followed, Keanu began working on something special late at night while Emma slept. He poured his heart into a project that would show her just how much she meant to him. He gathered her drawings, notes, and photographs, compiling them into a book filled with their shared memories. On the final page he wrote a message to Emma. My bright star, you've taught me the true meaning of love and courage. No matter where life takes us, you'll always be with me. Love, Uncle K. The book became his lifeline, a testament to their bond. But as Emma's condition worsened, Keanu found himself facing the unbearable truth, one he wasn't ready to confront. As the weeks passed, Emma's condition worsened each day, stealing a little more of her strength. Despite her exhaustion, she continued to smile, laugh, and draw whenever she could. Her sketchbook became her sanctuary, a place where she poured out her dreams, her fears, and her love for the life she was still fighting to hold on to. Keanu was always there, a constant presence in her life. He cooked her favorite meals even when she could barely eat. He read her stories when she was too tired to hold a book, and when the nights grew too quiet, he sat by her bedside, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. Even as his heart broke one evening as a storm raged outside, Emma asked Keanu to bring her sketchbook. Her voice was faint, but her determined was unmistakable. He handed it to her and she opened it to a blank page, her trembling hand gripping a pencil. What are you working on? He asked softly. Sitting beside her, she smiled weakly. A surprise for you. Keanu didn't press further. He simply watched as she worked, her pencil moving slowly but deliberately across the page. When she finished, she handed him the sketchbook, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Keanu looked down and saw a drawing of the two of them standing under a tree filled with blossoms. Above them the sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the scene. Beneath it she had written, "Thank you for being my light even when everything felt dark." Keanu felt tears streaming down his face as he looked at her. Emma, he began, his voice breaking. I wanted you to have this, she said, her words barely a whisper. So you'll always remember that you were my hero. Keanu hugged her gently, his tears falling into her hair. I'll never forget, Emma, not ever. That night Emma slipped into a deep sleep, her breathing steady but faint. Keanu stayed by her side, holding her hand and whispering the stories they loved to share in the early hours of the morning. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the storm clouds, Emma quietly passed away, her face peaceful and serene. Keanu held her hand until the nurses came, his heart shattered but filled with gratitude for the years they had shared. In the days that followed, Keanu found solace in the memories Emma had left behind. Her drawings, her laughter, and her unwavering spirit became a source of strength for him. He honored her by publishing the book he had created, a tribute to their bond and the love that had given them both a reason to keep going. The book, titled Bright Star, became a symbol of hope for others facing loss and hardship. People from all walks of life found comfort in its pages, inspired by the story of a young girl who had taught the world that even in the face of darkness, love could shine brighter than any star. Years later, Keanu stood at the edge of a quiet meadow, a single cherry blossom tree blooming in the center. He placed a small plaque at its base engraved with the words Emma had once written to him. Family is who you hold on to when the world lets go. As the wind carried the petals around him, Keanu closed his eyes and smiled, feeling Emma's presence in the warmth of the sun and the whisper of the breeze. She was gone, but her light would never fade, and in that moment he knew he had kept his promise to live, to love, and to never let the sadness win.